She went to take the holy water from her husband, Pastor Paul, and sprinkled it on Marie. But what happened was unbelievable and horrifying. Marie transformed into an evil mermaid with a very angry expression. Christine was not afraid. Once upon a time, in a very beautiful African village called Kulata, lived a very beautiful pregnant African woman named Christine and her husband, a very handsome 27-year-old African pastor named Pastor Paul. After 6 years of marriage, Christine had become pregnant, following the prayers and supplications of Pastor Paul to God. Christine was originally from Kulata, but she had married Pastor Paul, who was a stranger in the village of Kulata. Despite her parents' refusal, she had been stubborn and married this pastor. Christine, the pastor's wife, was very young and very beautiful, with unshakable faith in God. She was loyal and almost never lied. She was the ideal woman. She was attractive and had a very generous heart, always smiling. She loved to help others very much. Christine, the pastor's wife, was 2 months pregnant. The women were jealous of her despite her kindness. Christine loved her husband very much and trusted him completely. Christine, although she was a Christian, did not neglect her traditions and culture. She respected everything, and even respected the old occultists and oracles of her village. As for her husband Paul, a man of God, a stranger and very influential in the village, he was very intelligent and kind. He adored God. He was a very good Christian. His trust in God was such that he believed in nothing except God. Pastor Paul was a man very busy worshiping the Lord. Although he was kind, he had a nasty flaw. He did not like the village occultists. He despised marabouts, and even worse, he hated the oracles. Pastor Paul was very naive and foolish. He blindly trusted everyone who wanted to become a Christian, as if without faithful believers he could not worship God. Pastor Paul refused all summons from the elders, treating them as savages and worshippers of Satan, which made everyone angry. The old people hated Pastor Paul because of his impoliteness and arrogance. Christine's parents deeply regretted allowing their daughter to marry such stupidity. Every time, they suffered greatly, because on every street corner they were called all sorts of names. But every time his wife Christine advised him not to ignore the elders, even if they weren't Christians, to always accept their invitations and listen to what they had to say. But Pastor Paul, being as stubborn as he was, refused to listen. Sometimes they would argue. In reality, in the village where Pastor Paul and his wife Christine lived, which was actually Christine's native village, she knew the traditions and the power of the authority held by the old healers, oracles, and marabouts, and she respected them despite being a Christian. She never mocked them, because this was her home, and she knew her culture. Because in Africa, a child must never disrespect an elder or insult them. Even as a Christian, she never forgot her origins and her past. For Christine, whether Christianity or animism, everyone worshipped a single God. For Christine, there were no other gods, and everyone adored the same God. But this was not the case for Pastor Paul. For him, the fetishes of the village were not a form of worship towards God but a form of worship towards Satan, and that he was not prepared to accept being associated with. In his church, he would always tell his congregation, day after day, that no person was capable of performing miracles except Jesus Christ, and he would shout it loudly and proudly. His church was very crowded. People naturally liked him. At the same time, in the village, the old healers, oracles, and marabouts were very disappointed and angered because Pastor Paul spent all his days calling them Satan, which was causing problems in the village. Animist women were treated poorly by the Christian men and women of Pastor Paul's church, which was sad. Some believers even refused to sell food to these people in the village because of Pastor Paul's arrogance. The wives of the marabouts and oracles suffered greatly, not to mention their children. Discrimination was always palpable. Every time he was summoned to address the nonsense he was spreading in his church, Pastor Paul always refused to go. For him, they were just Satan, and that was that. It was a bad thing, and he should never have behaved that way. His wife Christine was 2 months pregnant. Her husband's behavior made her sad and caused her to overthink constantly. She had a premonition, as if something was going to happen. Unfortunately, she didn't know what it was. At the same time, in the village, the old occultists were sitting and making decisions. And so, they made a decision that was not going to leave Pastor Paul alone at all. Mystically, the old occultists, with angry expressions, asked for help from their but they all were unaware of one thing. a protective spirit does not answer people who pray with a heart full of anger. Unfortunately, however, a malevolent spirit from the village would. And so, they asked the protective spirit to punish Pastor Paul. In reality, in this village, there existed a water spirit in whom all the villagers believed. For this water spirit was the one who gave rain, and many other things to the villagers. This water spirit, called Kawakaza, was the one who had saved the village from a millennium-old war 1,000 years ago. According to the ancestors and legends passed down from generation to generation, the water spirit Kawakaza was a young woman with blue hair, very beautiful, emanating an aura visible only by the most powerful occultists. It was also said that this water spirit Kawakaza only appears to punish the arrogant. According to the old occultists, the water spirit is unpredictable and undetectable because she could be anything, a fish, a butterfly, anything. But what was certain was that she was present in the village. In truth, the water spirit was very powerful, capable of transforming into anything she desired. She could take the form of anything without difficulty. But unfortunately, there was not only a benevolent spirit, and this, nobody knew. There also existed a little-known legend, which said that if you pray with a malicious heart to destroy someone in the village, the true water spirit Kawakaza will not come, for she exists for good, but instead, a malevolent spirit possessing the same traits as the water spirit Kawakaza will appear. The only difference was that the malevolent spirit was a mermaid, whereas the water spirit Kawakaza was a spirit emanating an aura of authentic water. But when this malevolent water spirit appears, a life must automatically leave the village. That was the price to pay for its help. And this, nobody knew. Not the elders, not the old occultists, and certainly not the man of God, Paul, who didn't even believe in spirits. By asking the protective spirit for help, the old occultists had made a grave mistake, one they would soon discover in the near future. Meanwhile, on Pastor Paule's side, he was praying with his congregation at church. He did not know what awaited him. Upon returning home, he found his wife sitting sadly, her eyes wet as if she had been crying all day. Sitting beside her, he asked what was wrong. Christine told him to stop being so stubborn and to avoid angering the village elders. After hearing this, Pastor Paul became angry and started shouting at his wife, who was 2 months pregnant. She could only cry without saying a word. Her tears replaced her words. A few weeks later, Pastor Paul performed a miracle in the church that day. Even his congregation was astonished. Pastor Paul, in the name of God, had restored sight to a blind woman. The news spread everywhere throughout the village. The villagers, filled with wonder, also wanted to see miracles. Most had converted to Christianity, which made the pastor happy and also very influential. A month later, while traveling by carriage with his wife Christine to church, Pastor Paul passed near a river and spotted from a distance a mysterious woman with very long blue hair, lying as if drowned. Pastor Paul wanted to go to her, but his wife refused, telling him she had a bad feeling. She warned him it could be a spirit, but Pastor Paul, stubborn and confident, stopped the carriage and went to save the young lady. So eager was he for glory, he wanted to be a hero in the village. Upon reaching the mysterious woman with long blue hair, Pastor Paul discovered her unparalleled beauty. She was so beautiful that even his wife Christine could not compare. Not wanting anyone else to find this perfect beauty, he decided to bring the mysterious woman home with them, despite the objections of his wife Christine, who was strongly opposed to this decision. Once at Pastor Paul's home, the mysterious woman with very long blue hair sat without uttering a word. Pastor Paul paid more attention to this new woman, despite not even knowing her. His wife Christine began to grow jealous and complained frequently. Sometimes their arguments escalated. In reality, the moment he touched the mysterious woman with very long blue hair, he had bewitched himself. For she was something no one could have anticipated. A few days later, Pastor Paul began to resent his wife Christine, calling her a bad wife. He accused her of being excessively jealous. Christine cried every day. All this time, the mysterious woman remained silent, observing the once perfect couple as they argued incessantly. A few days later, the mysterious woman spoke a single word. She said, "My name is Marie, and I come from the neighboring village." Thus, she told her story, which seemed true but was unfortunately false. She had invented everything to win the trust of the couple. But the foolish Pastor Paul believed it without a second thought, while his wife Christine, for her part, wanted to believe it. Yet something inside her warned her to be wary of this overly beautiful, mysterious woman. And so, Pastor Paul allowed Marie to live in his home, but on the condition that she must attend church with them every time to pray. This was his stipulation. Speaking of church, Marie did not want to go, but she had no choice. She accepted. One Sunday morning at church, while Pastor Paul was praying with his eyes closed, everyone had their eyes closed. This Marie felt deeply unsettled. She was tormented by flames because she had no place in the house of God. Quickly, she went to the restroom as she had no other choice. For every time God's name was spoken, a part of her true body was revealed. Once in the restroom, she had already grown a tail. She was transforming into a mermaid. But unfortunately, before it was too late, Pastor Paul finished the prayer, and quickly Marie in the restroom regained the transformed appearance she had initially presented. In reality, this mysterious woman called Marie was an evil water mermaid who had only destruction in mind. She had transformed into a very beautiful African woman to destroy Pastor Paul. After the service, Pastor Paul, intrigued, asked Marie where she had gone. Her body having returned to normal, she lied that she had been in the restroom with diarrhea. Everyone believed her, and so, they returned home. Every night, from her room, Marie used her witchcraft to enter Pastor Paul's dreams and give him erotic dreams, where he made love to an unknown woman. Every night, Christine noticed that her husband was having these dreams, crying out Mary's name in his sleep as if they were intimately together. Since then, Pastor Paul no longer touched his wife Christine, who was 4 months pregnant. Christine began to hate Mary's presence in their home. She grew suspicious of her husband, Pastor Paul. She thought her husband was cheating on her. Meanwhile, Marie the evil mermaid was devising a Machiavellian plan. To finalize her schemes, she decided to kill Pastor Paul's wife, so she could be free to make him suffer before finishing him off. Sitting with a sly and distorted expression, she was utterly malicious. Christine argued with her husband daily. In her anger, Christine decided to stop accompanying her husband to church. Thus, she ceased praying and focused on her feelings of jealousy. She spent much time thinking, and no longer had time for prayer. She thought that when she prayed, she did it for her husband. But she didn't realize that, when you pray to God, it's not for someone else but for your own salvation. Christine began to lose weight due to worry and negative thoughts. Jealousy tormented her. Marie the evil mermaid sent her dreams where she watched her husband sleeping with another woman. The evil spirit's goal was to make her lose hope in God and turn away from the divine path, weakening her spirit so she could be killed. And it was successful. Every day, Christine lost more faith, surrendering to jealousy and hatred. Her husband wouldn't listen to her. Her life felt meaningless. If only she had known the truth. One day, when Pastor Paul had left the house and only she and Marie remained, Christine decided to go all in. She took her husband Pastor Paul's holy water and sprinkled it on Marie. But what happened next was unbelievable and horrifying. Marie transformed into an evil mermaid with a furious expression. Christine wasn't afraid. She fell to her knees and began to pray. But she had lost her faith, and to stand against a spirit of this magnitude would have required at least 5 true believers or Pastor Paul himself to stop it. Unfortunately, despite all her prayers, the evil mermaid killed her and drank all her blood. Christine had fallen, her body completely drained of blood. Thus, the evil mermaid killed the pastor's wife, Christine, who was 4 months pregnant. The scene was pitiful. Christine's lifeless body lay with her eyes wide open, as if she had suffered before dying, with tears in her eyes. After finishing what she had to do with Christine's body, she disguised it to look like a suicide. When he arrived home, Pastor Paul found his wife lying there, her body as cold as a corpse, stiff and rigid. He called for a healer. Upon arrival, the healer didn't waste any time. He announced the truth to Pastor Paul. The pastor went outside, kneeling and crying. He had lost his wife Christine and his unborn child. He sat weeping. Marie was proud of having eliminated Pastor Paul's wife. She was rejoicing and planning her next moves. But unfortunately for her, fate had surprises in store that she could never have anticipated. Meanwhile, Pastor Paul, driven by vengeance, decided to make those responsible for his wife's death pay. But who was responsible for his wife's death? He wondered, without even suspecting Marie, who was still living with him. While walking with a sad expression, Pastor Paul encountered an old African wise woman. She had the appearance of a witch, but she also seemed sorrowful. Pastor Paul, not normally the type to speak with occultists, decided to make an exception that day in the name of his wife Christine. The wise old woman, who was also saddened by Christine's mysterious death, sat with Pastor Paule and told him, "My name is Kawakaza, and I have lived here for millennia. My son, your wife's death was not natural, and I can feel her soul suffering in the afterlife. That mysterious, very beautiful woman you saved, you should question her, for she radiates a malevolent aura. Be wary of this mysterious woman, stay away from her." Pastor Paule wasn't listening, but the old woman's name sounded familiar to him. It seemed he had heard it before from his late wife Christine, but he had forgotten what she had said about her that day. The wise old woman added, "If you wish, I can help you confront this evil woman." Before she could finish her words, Pastor Paule interrupted her and said, "Old woman, if I listened to you at all, it was only to pay respect to my wife Christine, who insisted I show you respect. I hate all of you, you and your Satan whom you call God. As for me, no one can do anything against me. I won't allow you to accuse Marie of being a witch. The real witch here, and perhaps the one responsible for my wife's death, is you. I will deliver you all to avenge my wife." He left forcefully, but with a satisfied smile. The wise old woman said, "You are the only one responsible for your wife's death." With unparalleled calmness, the wise old woman added, "In life, we shouldn't trust strangers blindly. Just because we share the same religion doesn't mean we understand each other or comprehend each other's deepest feelings." Without a word, Pastor Paule set off, leaving the wise old woman sitting alone. He had noticed something strange about her. She wasn't like the other villagers, she seemed different. But the arrogant Pastor Paule continued on his way without looking back. However, after covering half the distance, he remembered what the name Kawakaza meant, according to his wife, and the significance of that ancient name. Despite being a Christian, Pastor Paule realized he might have been speaking with a mystical entity, but he hadn't listened to her. Meanwhile, as he walked away, the wise old woman said, "Oh my son, I would have liked to tell you the truth and help you, but you must discover for yourself and learn what respect means. You are ignorant of many things. I hope you won't die like your wife Christine." Then she vanished. Pastor Paule turned around and ran with all his might in the opposite direction. When he reached the spot where he had spoken with the wise old woman, she was nowhere to be found. Astonished, he understood that he might have been speaking with the protective spirit of this village, but because he had been so stubborn, he hadn't listened, and now the opportunity was lost. Standing there, Pastor Paule began to believe a little in what his late wife Christine had been telling him. Then, she disappeared. And so, tired, he decided to return home. In reality, the old woman had never existed, for she was the protective spirit of the village. Called Kawakaza, she had taken the form of a wise old woman to warn Pastor Paule of a danger, but unfortunately, the man refused her help. Meanwhile, Marie had put on seductive clothing to ensnare Pastor Paule in her demonic trap. Upon his arrival, Pastor Paule entered his room to rest and found Marie waiting for him in sexy underwear. Pastor Paule resisted, but as time passed, he lost control and threw himself onto the bed to do the deed. Without undressing completely, he only removed his trousers. As Marie was receiving Pastor Paule's member, lying together on the bed, she wanted him to spill his seed inside her as quickly as possible, for it was through this that she would be able to claim him. In reality, Marie, being a malevolent siren witch, could kill anyone if they had sex with her, and he spilled his seed inside her. But unfortunately, as the moment was approaching, a poorly sealed vial of holy water fell from Pastor Paule's breast pocket and spilled onto Mary's face. She let out a piercing scream and shoved Pastor Paule onto the floor. Pastor Paule, sitting with a face full of horror, witnessed something he had never imagined. Marie was transforming into a malevolent mermaid on the bed, her face now terrifying. The holy water had revealed her true form to Pastor Paule. On his knees, half naked, he prayed, but God did not answer his prayers, for he had committed adultery. His wife Christine had died just 3 days prior, and he had already begun sleeping with another woman. The powerful siren said, "There is nothing more you can do. My dear Pastor Paule, your faith has become useless. From the moment you failed to realize that I was responsible for the death of your wife Christine, and you will soon join her." Pastor Paule was astonished. Why was God not helping him? The siren sent flames that burned his throat. In agonizing pain, he cried out, "God, anyone, help me." But nothing happened. Just as he was about to lose consciousness, he said, "Gods of my ancestors, help me, Kawakaza, come to my aid." A few seconds later, the spirit Kawakaza arrived on the scene, emanating a soothing, warm water aura of immense power. She said, "You have finally understood the truth. Arrogance leads nowhere." The protective spirit commanded, "Demonic spirit, on your knees." The evil siren fell to her knees and began to dissolve until she vanished. Kawakaza said, "My son, repent before God and things will get better." And then, she disappeared. The next morning, Pastor Paul went before the village elders to ask for their forgiveness. Everyone felt remorse, for each was responsible for what had happened. Pastor Paul returned to his church and prayed to the Lord, without, however, accusing anyone of being Satan. Did God forgive Pastor Paul? He did not know. Only God himself knew. But Pastor Paul never stopped praying to God. Yet from that day on, he was never able to perform another miracle. A few months later, Pastor Paul went to his wife's grave to ask for forgiveness. When he arrived, he acknowledged his wrongs and cried like a child. Pastor Paul never told anyone that he had met Kawakaza, the village's protective spirit. He kept it to himself. The end. And so concludes the story of Pastor Paul. His arrogance cost the lives of his family and his miracle, and nearly cost him his soul. But by calling on Kawakaza, he cracked open a door to a world he believed was cursed. A world that ultimately saved him. Who truly is Kawakaza? A goddess? An ancestral spirit? Does her intervention mark the beginning of a new era for the village of Kulata, or the awakening of ancient, slumbering forces? Has the pastor truly rediscovered his faith, or has he simply traded one god for another? So subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. Smash that like button if this story captivated you, and comment down below, in your opinion. Did Pastor Paul do the right thing by asking the water spirit Kawakaza for help?